Kingdoms of Amalur Reckoning, out in early February, is a brand new single-player action RPG with 5 regions, 4 races and 3 class trees comprised of 22 abilities per tree, creating a destiny system which feeds directly into the action-heavy combat system. A bit too much all at once? Here, let us break it down for you. Video games. They're a thing that exists. Tekken Tag Tournament 2, to pick an example at random, is one of them. Fantasy is also a thing. Lord of the Rings is a good example of that. Combine video games and fantasy and you get something like Lord of the Rings Online. Another thing that exists is Ken Rolston. He is a notable designer of tabletop role-playing games and also video games. And he's a little bit bonkers. Crossing with video games, you get PBA Tour Bowling 2001. Crossing with fantasy, and there's something rotten in the state of Kislev. Hello, Warhammer! Mash all 3 together, however, and something magic happens. The Elder Scrolls 3, for instance, or the Elder Scrolls 4, or, wait for it, Kingdoms of Amalur Reckoning. See? Now you're getting it. Renowned for his work on the Elder Scrolls series, Ken Rolston is one of the best known people working in that busy intersection between fantasy and video games. But it seems even the most celebrated genre shapers can get tired of certain tropes. In Ken's case, it was typical RPG combat, as he told our very own Brendan Sinclair.
I want them to be thrashing around in their seats with a controller and jiggling and having fun, which is not, by the way, a characteristic of most role-playing game combat experiences. They tend to be slow-paced and less than satisfying.
So, while we've seen a whole slew of action games with RPG elements come forth recently, making it a format we're all fairly comfortable with, Kingdoms of Amalur Reckoning has the unenviable task of introducing itself as an RPG with action elements. Not quite sure of the difference? Well, let us explain what bits of the game are familiar, and then we can get to the bits that are scary and new, okay? In Kingdoms of Amalur, much like Peter Molyneux's Fable series, you play as the voiceless hero in a vibrant world, in this instance one named Amalur. The game takes place against the backdrop of a war between the young races, humans and whatnot, versus the elder race, the immortal Tuatha. There's a whole lot of aesthetic similarities to massively multiplayer fantasy RPG World of Warcraft and to the Fable games, but rather unlike the Fable series, you enter the world as, well, a corpse. You're also boxed about the ears by a narrator who sounds exactly like Galadriel from Lord of the Rings, just in case you didn't know you're about to play a fantasy game.
From the beginning, we were wrong, and only now, well into the 2nd decade of the conflict, have we begun to understand the mistakes we have made.
Happily, dead old you is then brought back to life by the mysterious Well of Souls, after which you set about trying to find some answers. How did you die, for instance? Why did you get brought back? Just who are you, anyway? That's the key mystery of the game, but you get to answer half of that question for yourself right away, by shaping your character. You choose between 4 different races, male or female, with each race offering different perks like additional aptitude for standard RPG activities like blacksmithing, alchemy, bartering, picking locks, you get the idea. You also choose a patron god for an extra bonus. This, fantasy fans, is a little like the birth signs bit in earlier Elder Scrolls games. From there, it's off a questing you go, and it's largely role-playing business as usual. Completing quests gets you experience points, you use experience points to level up. Simple. Now, it should be clear by now that Amalur is a role-playing game, and where would any RPG be without skill trees? Leveling up involves a skill menu, improving your aptitude for the different activities like lockpicking, as we mentioned earlier. However, don't go in expecting leveling up to be a one-shot affair like in Skyrim. Like in many an old-school RPG, you then find yourself with an abilities menu, allowing you to expand on the amount of stuff you can do during combat. This in itself is split into 3 different subsections. These menus are designed to allow you to shape the character you want to control. Cards also play a part in shaping your character, helping determine your destiny. Counter to old-school RPG tradition, there are no rigidly defined classes, though destinies and talent trees do lean toward different character types. If you spent time with RPGs before, you'll probably find yourself gearing your character toward a familiar setup. The game is also generous with unlock points as you level up, so it's easy to upgrade all 3 combat styles as you go, or progress more rapidly in one particular style should you decide it's the one for you. You can also equip different destinies as you go, making for a pretty flexible character. This is useful for the game's combat system, which, for the purposes of this feature, we will refer to as the scary new bit. Combat in Kingdoms of Amalur will be pretty familiar to you if you've played an action game before, you know, because it's an action combat system. You've got two buttons, one for your primary weapon and one for your secondary. If you like straight up combat, there are swords, daggers, bows and the like. For the mages among you, there's magic aplenty, based around the mighty elemental pillars of fire, ice and lightning. In addition, you have access to power attacks which you can use on the fly. Charge up your fate meter and you can also enter reckoning mode, which is kind of a bullet time kill fest, culminating in a quick time like event which has the potential to earn you 100 XP in one beautiful bloody blow. Now, during combat you may need to use a potion or two, and these are mapped to the directional pad, letting you take a swig mid-swing of your sword. All this amounts to a system that lets you fight with your whole arsenal without constantly pausing to access a submenu and equip different gear. And that's the key to the whole mystery, really. What is Kingdoms of Amalur Reckoning? It's an RPG with a buttload of menus, but you don't have to access any of them when you're busy killing dudes. In the words of combat design Joe Kadara, that makes it
an open-world action RPG with the best combat that you've ever seen in an RPG.
Or in the words of game design luminary Ken, it's...
That's cool.
So what do you think? Has Ken Rolston again proven to be the beardy saviour of RPGs? Or are you going to miss scrolling through inventory menus as you kill your way across the kingdom? Let us know in the comments, or hey, fire us a message on Twitter. All the relevant info should be on screen now. Play us out, Ken.
Hi. 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 Hi.
Oh my god.
Rolston?
Hi. 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 Hi.
Oh my god.
Rolston? Ken Rolston? Ken Rolston?
Hearing me talk, total waste of time with this stuff.
Out.
Cool. Gibber. Cool. Out. Cool. Gibber.
Rolston?
RPG. Piece of candy.
Rolston?
RPG. Piece of candy. I did it by accident. I did it by accident. I'll gibber. Did it by accident. I did it by accident. I'll gibber.
Ken Rolston?
Going on a rampage.
Ken Rolston?
Candy.
Ken Rolston?
Going on a rampage.
Ken Rolston?
Candy.
I particularly like noises like satisfying. Yes. Thrashing combat. Guns. Satisfying. Yes. Thrashing combat. Fun.